resolutions, but they're focusing us in on those resolutions that are worthwhile for us to have. So first of all, I need protection from Satan, from his influence over me, from his insinuation. Secondly, to strengthen me against my carnal soul, which invites me to evil. So it's not only external influences that pull me away from Allah, I also have my own tendencies, my own inclinations, my own desires that are also constantly pulling me away from Allah. So I ask Allah to give me strength to resist all of that. Third, and to engage me in that which brings me near to you. So now that I've gotten protection from Satan, I'm protected and strengthened against my own desires, now help me to do those things that are going to help me to get closer to you. Right? I have this strength, I have this power, give me motivation, inspiration, so I use all of that to do things that are worthwhile in your eyes. O generous one, O possessor of might and kindness. As-salawatu.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
The hadith I want to share with you is a hadith from the 8th Imam, Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
He had a companion who was incognito. He was an Abbasid, right? Part of the powers in rule in the family of the Abbasids, but he was a Shi'i. His name was Ar-Rayyan ibn Shadid. So Ar-Rayyan comes to see the Imam one day, and he narrates this tradition that in the exchange that he has with Imam Ar-Rida alayhi salam. He says, I entered the presence of Ar-Rida on the first day of Muharram, so a day like tomorrow. He asked, Ibn Shadid, are you fasting? I replied, no. He said, this day is the day on which Zechariah, Prophet Zechariah, petitioned his Lord, saying, Lord, grant me righteous progeny out of your grace. You are the hearer of prayers. God answered his prayer and ordered the angel to announce to Zechariah, while he yet stood in the sanctuary, that God gives you glad tidings of John, Yahya. Thus, whoever fasts on this day and then petitions God, God will answer him as he answered Zechariah. Right, so this tells us now something that we can do for tomorrow. One of the a'mal, one of the rites for tomorrow, the first of Muharram, is to fast. Right? It's the anniversary of the day. You're familiar with the story, inshallah, right? The story of Zechariah, right? Going in, he was the caretaker and the one who was in charge of looking after Maryam. So he would make sure that she was taken care of while she was in the sanctuary. And he says, he noticed, and the Quran tells us the story, it's with Ali Imran and other places, that he would go in every day to look in on her, make sure she was taken care of, and he would find that there was all sorts of provisions already provided for her. Right? A hadith say that she would be given even winter fruits in the summer, and even summer fruits in the winter. So it was out of season things, which nowadays is not so strange because we get our fruits from Chile and all these different places. But in those days, that was something amazing. It was miraculous. And he asked her where she got this from, because no one had access to her chambers except for him. Right? And she would say it's from Allah. Allah provides for whomever He wishes without any sort of accounting. So Zechariah gets inspired by that moment and by Maryam's reminder to him that Allah provides without any reckoning. And he, who needs a child because he was old, his wife was old, they had been barren until then, they had no children. So he takes the opportunity and he turns right there where he is and he prays to Allah and says, Allah, give me a child. And Allah immediately, right, the Quran makes it a point to say, as he was there, he said dua, he said Ameen after the prayer, and immediately the angel appears and says, I give you glad tidings of Yahya to be born. Right? And so there's that day then, on which Zechariah made this prayer has been made a blessed day. And so the Imam is encouraging us to take advantage of the day to fast. Right? There's a celebration aspect because of what happened to Zechariah. That's been kind of dampened by what's happened to Imam Hussein, but in any case, this day is important for us. So try to fast tomorrow if you can, and take advantage of making dua the same way Zechariah made dua. And the Imam promises that if you do that, then Allah will answer your prayer as easily and as completely as He answered the prayer for Zechariah. Then he said, Ibn Shabib, Muharram is a month in which the Arabs of old, from the age of ignorance, would forbid transgression and fighting because of its sanctity. Right, so this was a tradition from the Jahiliyyah, the age of ignorance, even before Islam came, that certain months, Muharram being one of the Ashura al-Hurum, right? Muharram was a month of peace, of sanctity, where even if they were engaged in a war, they truce for the month of Muharram, and then as soon as Muharram passes, then they can continue the war. Right? It had that much sanctity for the Jahili Arabs. Yet, Imam Rida says, this nation of Muslims has not realized its sanctity, or the sanctity of their Prophet. In this very month, they slaughtered his progeny, captured his womenfolk, and pillaged his belongings. May God never forgive them for this. Right? This very month, when even in the Jahiliyyah it was like this, in Islam it should be even more sanctified. But during this month, which is still one of the Ashura al-Hurum, one of the sacred months, the Ummah of the Prophet did this not only to any old person, but to the very person who brought them the teachings, the descendants of that very Prophet who taught them the sanctity of this month. They go and they do this to him. The Imam continues, Ibn Shabib, if you cry for anything, cry for Hussein ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. For he was slaughtered as a ram is slaughtered. And along with him, 18 men from his household were killed, the likes of whom are not to be found on earth. The 7 layers of the sky and earth mourned his death. 4,000 angels descended to earth to aid him, only to find him already dead. Since then, they remain near his grave, disheveled and dust-covered, and they will remain so until the revolution of the Mahdi. They will be his supporters, and their war cry will be for the revenge of Hussein. Let me explain a little bit about this particular part of the hadith, and sometimes it raises some questions for people. So first of all, the Imam comments that along with Imam Hussein during this month, 18 men from his Ahlul Bayt were killed. Right, those we know the names of. And he says that these are people who are unmatched, the likes of whom are nowhere to be found on earth. Right, these special companions of Imam Hussein, they've gone down in history, the history of Tashayyu in particular, as being the most outstanding companions that any prophet or Imam has ever had. Imam Hussein also, he says this, inshallah, we'll recount it as we get closer to the eve of Ashura, how he comments and praises his companions like this, saying that I don't know of any prophet who's had an Ahlul Bayt like mine, or anyone who's had companions like mine. Then he mentions that the 7 layers of the sky and earth mourned his death. So this, it could be literal and it could be figurative. We don't know for sure. Our scholars are split, they have both opinions. That this could be a literal indication that in some way that we don't understand, that we don't perceive, even the physical world weeps for the death of the Imam. And we have similar hadith for Yahya alayhi salam. Right, there are hadith that narrate that when Yahya was killed, similarly the sky wept for him and blood came down, these kinds of things. Right, so there's a connection on many levels between between Yahya alayhi salam and Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Right, a hadith mentioned the similarities between them. They were both born after 6 months of their mother's pregnancy. Instead of them carrying to term, after 6 months, these two were born. They were both killed in similarly heinous ways by evil, tyrannical kings, basically on a whim. Yahya was killed kind of as a bridal gift to a woman that the king was trying to court, and Imam Hussein, we know his story and how he was killed as well. So there's similarities like that on both levels. Then the 4,000 angels he mentions, so there are hadith that tell us that Allah sent a delegation of angels, an army of angels to come and aid Imam Hussein, to offer their services to him. That if you want, we'll help you, we'll wipe out the army. Right? Imam Hussein himself refuses their help. Right? He judges that the best thing to do is not to take supernatural help, but rather resort to only natural means. Make this the ultimate test for all these people who have claimed support of me, to see whether they will come to me and support me even when all odds are against me. Do they believe in me to that extent where they're willing to come to guarantee death because this is the truth? Or are they only going to come when they think it's victory? Because that happened, right? That happened when he left Mecca. When he left Mecca, one of the things that we see is that he left with many supporters. He cut his Hajj short and he traveled towards Kufa. He had many supporters with him then, and along the way, as people started to find out who he was and what he was going to do, they came in droves. Tribes by tribes came to support him and marched with him towards Kufa. Why? Because they thought that he was marching to definite victory over Yazid. But as it became clear that he's not marching to victory, he's marching to death, all those people faded away. Right? And he's left with the people that we know, the 72 companions, or at most maybe 150 companions based on different reports. Right? But that's what he's left with after having thousands of supporters pledging their support, but when it came down to it, they abandoned him. So now he wants to maintain that test. Let me test these people to the utmost, test my own companions, provide the ultimate test for myself and for them, and then for other people as well. And so he refuses the supernatural aid of Allah, not out of ingratitude, right? But simply to make sure that this is the ultimate test for himself and for the people around him. The angels go back, and then there are reports that when they do come a second time to offer their help a second time, then it's already too late. Then Imam Hussein is dead. So it's not that they miscalculated or Allah sent the help at the wrong time. Of course, Allah is above all of that. But that's the best way that we've understood why these 4,000 angels, they came, but he'd already been slaughtered by that time. Imam al-Rida continues, Ibn Shabib, my father reported to me from his father that his grandfather said, right? We're talking about Imam al-Rida, he says, my father, who is Imam al-Kazim, who said his grandfather, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, said that his father, so Imam Baqir alayhi salam, and he's narrating this tradition. He says that when Hussein was killed, blood and red earth rained down from the sky. So this also, we have multiple narrations that say this. We don't know for sure whether this is a literal kind of description of what happened or there's something figurative. All we can say is this is what they've told us, and it's multiple traditions, so we can't just blow it off and say, oh, supernatural things, let's throw them out the window. No, maybe it was a miracle, or maybe there's some reality to it, or maybe it was something on a spiritual level that we don't necessarily perceive with our own senses. But whatever it is, this has been narrated in many different traditions. Ibn Shabib, if you cry for Hussein until your tears flow down your cheeks, God will forgive you all the sins you have perpetrated, whether they be small or big, few or many. And this is a very important tradition. It's repeated multiple times by various imams, where they put so much significance on this particular practice of what we're doing now, commemorating Imam Hussein, and working ourselves up emotionally as well. Intellectually, yes, we align ourselves with them, we understand who they are, the logic and the intellect of our minds should also be engaged. But they want us also to be engaged on an emotional level, and there's value to it, and they've encouraged us to recount the story for one another, and to kind of get into that mood where we shed tears for this as well. And they've offered immense reward. This is what they do. When they want to establish a tradition and establish an institution, they're following Allah's footsteps, where He puts immense reward and dangles carrots in those directions that He wants us to go. Right? Because He knows that by nature we're selfish. By nature we want to do what's in our own best interest. And so He gives us that best interest and offers that reward in those directions where He wants us to move. We'll speak about this, inshallah, a little bit more. Oftentimes people hear this kind of a thing and it gives them, instead of giving them an appreciation for how great Imam Hussein is and how great these commemorations are, sometimes they come away with a license to sin. And we shouldn't take that message away from this. Certainly Allah is not saying that you can do whatever you want, you can sin as much as you want. If you just cry for Hussein, then I'll wipe it all off. We'll play a game. Right? Certainly that's not the spirit that Allah would say such a thing, or that Imams would say such a thing. They want us to be devoted followers of them, to follow in their footsteps to the best of our ability, which means that we should try to live our lives like them. Allahumma ja'al mahyana mahya Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, wa mamatana wa mata Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Make our life and our death like their lives and deaths. Right? We don't want to say, they live one way, but they're ma'soom, they're infallible. I can't do it. Who am I? I'm going to live my life the way I want to live, and I'll come once a year and cry for Imam Hussein, and everything's clear. That's definitely against the spirit of everything that we know from Islamic teachings. When they say offer this kind of reward, they're offering it because this is one of the ways that we can become more and more attached to them, more and more similar to them. By coming to these gatherings, by commemorating, we become so close to them, emotionally attached to them, that we start to emulate them. We start to want to be like them, as close as we can to them, knowing that we'll never get there, but we're never going to stop trying. We want to try to live our lives like them, like their companions, devoted to Islam, devoted to Allah, always trying to do what's right, always trying to refrain from sin. But inevitably, in our fallibility, we will make mistakes. Our passions will overcome us, we'll say things, we'll do things that we know are wrong, that Allah would then have the right to punish us for. But in His mercy, He's offered so many routes for us to efface all of those sins, through repentance, through penance, through replacing our bad deeds with good deeds, and through crying for Imam Hussein. So one of the ways that He's offered us His mercy is to encourage us to cry for Imam Hussein and establish this emotional connection with him so that we can, inshallah, become closer to him and more like him. The 8th Imam continues, he says, Ibn Shabib, if you wish to meet God Almighty with no sin on your record, then visit Hussein's grave. That's another encouragement that we see repeatedly in the words of the Imams. Like they themselves, even the latter Imams, after Imam Hussein, they focused on visiting his grave in particular. All the other Imams in their own place, but they themselves have encouraged us to go to his grave. Right? They want us to establish this, and it creates a sort of a test for us. That focal point of Imam Hussein's grave, it's difficult to go. Just as Hajj is difficult in every age and every time, no matter how luxurious the Hajj might seem and how expensive it might be, it's always difficult. There are always challenges in the path of the Hajjaj. In the path of the visitors of Imam Hussein's grave, there are always incredible challenges. Now it's nothing compared to what it has been in the past. But throughout history, there's always been some government ruling over that area that at times would threaten people's lives, amputations and these kinds of things for anyone who would cross into that area and go for ziyarah to Karbala. That it was ruled by Saddam for much of many of your lifetimes. Now for the first time we have a little bit of easing of those political hardships. But for anyone who goes, anyone who has gone, you'll face so many other hardships and so many other tests on the way. This is Allah's way of testing us, to test our devotion to these people. It's very easy to sit here and commemorate Imam Hussein. It's very easy to sit at home and recite a ziyarah and think that, if I were in Kufa, I would be one of the few people who supported Muslim bin Aqil. I wouldn't be one of the ones who abandoned. Right? It's easy to think that we'd be one of the 72 who stayed with Imam Hussein, not the hundreds, maybe thousands who abandoned. Right? But he wants to test it, see, are you really amongst those people? Right? So he gives us little tiny challenges, little pittance of a challenge compared to what they had to face. Right? To see, is that going to deter us? Are we going to turn away from them? Or are we going to persevere? Do the ziyarah, show our devotion to him, stay with it all the way to the end. Ibn Shabib, if you wish to reside in lofty palaces in paradise with the Prophet, then pray for God to damn the murderers of Hussein. And to say, Allahumma la'an qatalat al-Hussein. One of the effects of that is that Allah will reward us in such a way, we align ourselves so completely with the Ahlul Bayt, so completely against their enemies, that we're willing to call down Allah's the damnation upon them. Right? The reward of that is that, inshallah, we'll live our lives in that path, and then we'll be raised on the Day of Judgment in the company of Ahlul Bayt and live for eternity in their company as well, inshallah. But there are so many conditions. It's not that easy. It's so much easier said than done. We shouldn't, again, let's not fool ourselves into thinking that it's as easy as attending a majlis, as easy as shedding a tear, and then everything's guaranteed. It's got to be a life-changing majlis, a life-changing event where you come, with the intention to listen, to learn, to reform yourself, to establish a stronger connection that you had before to the Imam, and then the next day, your life is now different from how it was the day before. Now you're one step closer to being like him, right? Living your life like his life. Then you're on the right path towards this kind of reward. Otherwise, it's just kind of a movement of our tongue. Like Imam Hussein himself says that the religion is like just something that kind of slides off people's tongues very easily. But it doesn't translate into action or into something deeper in our hearts. Ibn Shabib, if you wish to have the reward of one who was martyred with Hussein. Right? We recount their stories. Do you want to be one of the companions of Imam Hussein, one of the martyrs who died with him? He says, then repeat, whatever you think of them, Ya laytani kuntu ma'ahum fa'afuza fawzan 'azima. Would that I had been with them, that I might have achieved their great victory. Right? So try to remember that as well. It's an easy dua. It's from the Quran itself. In the Quran, there are munafiqeen and hellfire saying it, but they use the same phrases to tell us that have this kind of longing. Right? We weren't with him. We didn't have the opportunity to actually be with him at Karbala. It's easy to say that if I had been there, I would have been on this side or that side. Right? But he wants us to have that longing in our heart, to have that intention that, yes, with all my heart, if I wish I could have been with them. I wish I could have been with them and faced the enemy with them and died with them. To have that kind of longing is as good. Allah is willing to give us the reward of actually being there if our longing is sincere and true. And the last phrase of the hadith, Ibn Shabib, if you would like to be with us at our loftiest stations in paradise, if you want to be with the Ahlul Bayt, then be joyful when we feel joy, and be aggrieved when we feel grief. فَحْزَنْ لِحُزْنِنَا وَافْرَحْ لِفَرَحِنَا. That's a good phrase to remember as well. فَحْزَنْ لِحُزْنِنَا وَافْرَحْ لِفَرَحِنَا. And when we feel sad, you feel sad. When we feel joy, you feel joy. Again, align yourselves completely with us. Whenever we're on a path, make sure you're on the path with us. Whenever we speak out against something, make sure you're right behind us and you support us 100%. Have that kind of complete alignment with us and against our enemies. Tawalli, tabarri. Right? That's the true meaning of tawalli and tabarri. And it's often mispronounced in Farsi and Urdu as tabarra and tawadda. It's actually tawalli and tabarri. Complete alignment with everything that's godly and good, and complete alignment against everything that's against Allah. And hold fast to our authority. For if a person were to ally with even a stone, then God would raise him with in its ranks on the Day of Judgment. Right? Allah is interested not only in our own deeds, but also in our alliances and our friendships. You've heard this, we have this guidance from many ahadith as well, where one of the reasons why it's so important for us to keep good company is because we'll be judged with the company we keep. And that happens in the dunya, but Allah will also do it in akhirah as well. Right? If I'm hanging around with people who are of low character, and you see me in that kind of a group, then automatically you're going to think that I'm also of that same character. That's just the way we think. That's natural. And we can't say, oh, you shouldn't judge people judge a book by its cover, these kinds of things. That's just that's a reality of life. And so we're supposed to be very conscious of the people we hang around with, not to put ourselves in a situation where we're hanging around with, where we're friends with, we're associates with people who are of character that is not the kind of character we want to be associated with. And if we do put ourselves in that situation, the phrase in a hadith, and if someone comes and blames you and says, thinks something bad of you, لا تلومن إلا نفسك. And don't blame anyone but yourself. The Imam doesn't say, or the Prophet doesn't say, oh, that person shouldn't have thought that bad thing about you. That's in his own place. But he blames you and says it's your fault for putting yourself in a situation where you're hanging around with people who are of low character. Right? So we want to make sure that we are associated with the friends that we keep are the kinds of friends that are at least as good as us, in the same path as us, or even better than us. Right? Take advantage of this. And instead of hanging around with low people, find the best people. The kind of people you want to be raised with on the Day of Judgment. Those are the kinds of people you should try to hang around with. Those are the kinds of friends and associates you should try to make. Because Allah will judge you, not only based on your own deeds, your own character, but also according to the people that you have hung around. Right? So the Imam, he echoes the same idea. He says, hold fast to our authority. Be with us. Be aligned with us. If you're aligned with us, then Allah will raise you with us. But being aligned with us, again, is not as easy as saying, I'm on their side. You got to show it with your life, your actions, your words, that you are committed to being as close as you can to their side. And that's a lifelong struggle that we have to engage in, to resist everything that pulls us away from them, and to try to do everything we can to try to associate with them. Recite the salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Is there a clock?
Let's see if time.
Recite one more salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
So let me shift gears a little bit. I'll take about 10 more minutes of your time to speak a little bit about the commemoration of Ashura. And I think this is a really important discussion, so I'm going to carry it over to tomorrow as well. We have an incredibly diverse group. And this is not just in your community, it's any community of Shia that you go to in America, especially maybe in other places as well, you'll find the same sort of diversity. And that is, at the same time, a huge blessing and also a huge challenge for any community where that phenomenon takes place. Oftentimes what we find is that we have an immigrant population. We're still very kind of young in this country, new to this country even as a religion. Right? Islam in general, but especially Tashayyu, is new to this country. And naturally, a lot of our community members are immigrants. First generation, and then, like me, second generation immigrants. Oftentimes what we find is that immigrants, when they come and they are devoted to Islam, along with Islam, they also have certain cultural practices, certain things that they have always done that they bring with them. I'd like to call it baggage. Baggage has a very negative connotation. It's not baggage necessarily, but it's just a cultural kind of artifacts and relics from a previous culture which they bring with them. And they feel very comfortable with those cultural expressions, those ways of doing things. And they would like to see that keep happening because that's what they're comfortable with. One challenge is for their children, the second generation. Right? They're now born here. They don't have the same roots in some foreign country. Now they're Americans. Sometimes those children, they will simply assume and assimilate their parents' culture, language, whatever, and continue like their parents and sit right next to them and participate in these gatherings as though they themselves were immigrants. More often, though, that doesn't happen. More often, children will either find their own meaning and kind of take things into their own hands, which is very rare, or more often than not, abandon the whole thing and think that this religion is foreign, and just as that foreign culture is irrelevant to me now I'm American, this foreign religion, I'll put that in quotation marks, this foreign religion also is irrelevant to me, and I don't need it anymore. And then our convert community has an even greater challenge. They don't have the cultural roots in some foreign country. They're fully American, maybe for many generations, and they have no roots anywhere else, no linguistic ties to any other culture. And so they also struggle severely. This is unconventional for a lecture, I wanted to ask, raise your hand if you are, for instance, if you identify as a Pakistani. So a few people. If you identify as an Indian, as an Irani, as an Afghani, as an Iraqi. Did I leave anyone else out? Americans. What about Americans? I left that out for Americans. Sorry. Okay. So in the red. You raised your hand as an Iranian, correct? Yeah. Were you born in Iran? You were born in Iran. Okay. I've done that before with other groups. I've done it with a room full of children and asked them where they're from, and they all say, other countries, Lebanon, Iraq, these kinds of things. And I asked them, were you born in Lebanon? I said, no. Did you ever live in Lebanon? No. I said, why are you Lebanese? Why are you Iraqi? Why do you consider yourself some foreign nationality and foreign culture? You were born here, you live here, and you're probably going to die here. You're full-fledged American. Right? I had an encounter with a convert. I've been working quite a lot with different converts, and this one person, he actually wasn't a convert yet, he was just exploring Islam. And he came and he expressed his interest, and he'd done a lot of work, a lot of reading, all these different things to try to develop his knowledge of Islam before he made a decision to convert or not. And one of his comments has stuck with me for like 2-3 years after he said it. He said that one difficulty, one challenge I'm facing in thinking about whether I can become Muslim or not is that Islam seems like a very foreign religion to me. Think about that. Islam seems like a very foreign religion to me. Do those two words even go together? Foreign and religion? Do religions have nationality? Is Christianity more American than Islam is? Is Islam more foreign than Judaism is? Religions don't have nationality. But his perception, his comment is so wise because he put a finger on a huge problem that we have in our community. And that is that we've made Islam foreign. When the Prophet came to make Islam universal, to guide everyone to a universal message of complete submission to Allah, complete alignment with the will of God, complete unalignment and kind of animosity towards anything that's ungodly. That's a universal message. It's not bound by place and time. But what's happened over time in some cultures and some parts of our community, we've tied culture so closely to religion that they're one and the same. And for somebody who isn't from that culture to come in and think about, is this a religion I can also be part of? They feel like, no, if I'm going to become Muslim, I've got to become Iraqi. If I'm going to become Muslim, I need to learn how to speak Arabic. I can't become Muslim if I don't learn Urdu. If I can't eat spicy food, how can I possibly be a Muslim? If I can't sit on the floor for 2 hours, I can't be a Muslim. Right? So all these cultural things that are not integral, they're not at all integral to Islam, in fact have nothing to do with Islam, except for the fact that they happen to be the expression of a particular Muslim people of their understanding of Islam. That's all. It's simply one manifestation, right? But there's nothing more Islamic about Arab food than Indian food, or Indian food than American food. There's nothing more Islamic about one or the other. If it's halal, if it falls into the guidelines of what's halal, then everything's Islamic. Right? But for someone to have that sort of a feeling speaks volumes to our shortcoming as a community in being able to separate culture from religion in a meaningful way. Not in a kind of dry, what do you call it, like a almost inhuman way where we say, Islam is somehow, it has nothing to do with any sort of culture. We're going to remove culture from Islam. That's not the point either. But it shouldn't be tied together. Because culture will inevitably fade. Over time, immigrant populations, think those of you who are white converts, those of you who are from African backgrounds or Hispanic backgrounds, you might have more of a sense of this from your own ancestry. Most of the immigrants who are here probably haven't felt it as strongly yet, but sometimes we do have forebodings of that when we look at our children. Many times they are much less of that foreign culture than we'd like them to be for many people. They like to have that kind of the culture to carry on for at least as long as they're alive. Afterwards, they don't know what's going to happen. But the reality is, all white people that we see around us, they are originally foreign. They all came from some other country. And for maybe a generation or two, they were Irish, or they were, Czech, or, whatever country they came from. But the reality is now, they're just Caucasian Americans. And besides the McGregor at the end of their name, there's no other sign that they once were Scottish. Culture has gone, for the most part, except in maybe some superficial ways. And that is the inevitable way things happen. We should realize that that's going to happen. Even these foreign cultures that we brought in as Muslims, eventually the language is going to go. Eventually the culture is going to go. The food's going to go. If we tie Islam too closely to that culture, then Islam will also go. If Islam is simply part of our culture, then as culture goes, Islam will also go. It's only if we're able to realize that they're two separate things. Islam is separate, culture is separate. I can hang on to my culture because I like it. I like my food, the food from whatever my parents used to eat. But that doesn't mean that that's Islamic food and any other food is not Islamic. That doesn't mean that I need to make sure that you need to eat that same food to be as good a Muslim as I am. Right? None of that. That's my personal choice. And as long as it falls within the parameters of Islam, then it's Islamic food. as much as the next culture's food is Islamic food, as long as it falls in the parameters of halal and haram, of halal. Right? And that I think is extremely important to realize. And that we can now apply to these practices of commemorating Imam Hussein as well. It's so important that we refrain from making the commemorations of Imam Hussein into simply a cultural practice, but rather realize the universality of the message of Karbala and do whatever we can to try to emphasize that universality of it. This is a message that everyone can benefit from. Everyone needs this message. It's not simply the property of one particular culture, one particular language. Majalis, these kinds of commemorations don't have to happen in one particular way. There's nothing sacred about the form as a form. If in one culture, poetry is the way that people are able to connect to Imam Hussein's message and to his person, great, that works in that cultural context. As time progresses, if there's some other form which now also serves that same purpose, but maybe is a different form than poetry, so be it. If a particular language works for particular people because that's the language they speak and that's the language they resonate with, great. But if the people change and their culture changes and their language changes, then there's no reason to hold on to a language that's no longer relevant to them. And by doing so, we're doing more of a disservice than we are a service. We're not hanging on to anything that's valuable. We're hanging on to the wrong things, and we're letting go of those things that are most important. And that's really important to realize. Recite this all.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
All right, so very briefly, what I'd like to speak about for the coming days is decision-making from an Islamic perspective. Right? I'm going to kind of flesh out the topic over the course of the days. I'd like, my habit, I don't know if anyone knows any of my previous speeches and things like that, but if you do, you know that I try to be as thorough as I can and very systematic in how I talk about things and present things, which is good for those who are always here and bad for those who miss a day. Right? So I really encourage you, if you can, if it's at all possible, try to come consistently so you kind of get every piece of the puzzle as I put the whole thing together, the whole topic together. If you miss out, then it's going to be a little challenging, I think, to catch up. I'll try not to make it that, maybe I'll also make an effort. I know the logistics are sometimes hard for people who are coming from out of town, but at least make your effort and realize that, inshallah, you'll be able to benefit from the lectures. We're going to go through and talk about some of the important factors that go into making a good decision, in a general sense. Right, so we have issues like consultation, right, so the really important Islamic concept, shura, how to do that, what's the benefit of it, how has the Quran and the Prophet and the Imams encouraged us to consult with people before we make a decision. For instance, another topic that we're going to talk about is istikhara. Oftentimes the first way people make a decision is by doing istikhara. So let's understand what exactly is istikhara, what does it mean, how is it supposed to be used, are we using it the right way or not, to make decisions. And then after we talk about kind of general concepts about how to make decisions and what Islamic guidance we have for decision making in general, I want to zoom in on certain aspects of life, certain hard decisions that we inevitably have to make in our lives, marriage and career choices and where you're going to live and these kinds of things. And think more specifically about those aspects of life and what kinds of guidance we can derive from Islam to make those decisions in a healthy way that's keeping Islamic ideals, Islamic laws, Islamic guidance in mind as we make these important decisions in our lives. Alright, so that's inshallah the topic that I'd like to speak about during these days that I'm here with you. Recite the salawat, please.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
I apologize, I've gone over the time a little bit. I'll take about 5 more minutes of your time and just recount a little bit of the story of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. There's an event that happened about a year and 1 month, or 2 years and 1 month exactly before the day of Ashura. Right? During the day of Mina, in the year 58, Imam Hussein alayhi salam he was in the plains of Mina in his tent performing Hajj. He reached out through his companions and his family to call together something on the order of 200 companions of the Prophet who were still alive. Another 600 or 700 tabi'een, the next generation of scholars. His entire Ahlul Bayt, cousins, uncles and aunts, whoever was present, he brought them together as well. In this huge gathering, he addressed them, he asked them, do you all recognize and remember that I am Hussein, the son of Ali and Fatima? Do you recognize that my grandfather was Rasulullah, the messenger of God? And everyone resoundingly says, yes, of course we know that. And he asks, do you know that the Prophet said about me and my brother Hassan that we are the masters of youth of paradise? Everyone said, yes, of course we know that. He asked them, do you know that Ayat al-Tathir, إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا, was revealed for us and about us? They said, yes, of course we know that. Do you know that my father was named Amir al-Mu'mineen by the Prophet, the commander of the faithful? Yes, of course we know that. Do you all know that at Ghadir Khum, the Prophet said, Man kuntu mawla fa'ali al-mawla? They said, yes, of course we know that. Do you know that Surah Al-Insan, which praised these people for preferring this orphan and this prisoner and this captive who came begging for food, preferred them over themselves? Yes, of course we know that. And he goes through and he recounts item after item, hadith after hadith, incident after incident, that all of these people had either been direct or indirect witnesses to. The Imam had realized that there was a weakness coming over Muawiyah's grasp on the Muslim lands. Muawiyah was aging, perhaps he was sick at the time. But the Imam sensed an opportunity, and he wanted to make sure that he did everything on his part so nobody could later blame him and say, why didn't you act at this time? Why didn't you seize the moment? So at this time, when the maximum number of Muslims were gathered in one place, he reaches out to those who are most influential, and he reminds them who he is, where he comes from, who his forefathers are. And he, first of all, criticizes them for their lack of support and says, why then, if you recognize all of this, did you abandon my father? Were you companions, you 200 of you who are here, were you not there at Ghadir Khum? Did you not shake hands with Ali? And say, Assalamu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen? Did you not witness what the Prophet said about him? Why did you abandon him? When the Prophet died, you all gave your allegiance to somebody else and abandoned him. Why did you abandon my mother when she came and knocked at your doors and reminded you of the oaths that you had pledged to the Prophet and to Imam Ali? And your excuse that you offered was, you're too late. I already gave my allegiance to someone else. If only you'd come a few days earlier, I could have given it to you. Why did you abandon my brother, Hassan? He called on you to stand with him, to fight against Muawiyah and finish off what Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali had tried to do, wasn't successful in doing. In the Battle of Siffin, to have a second Siffin and wipe out Muawiyah once and for all. Where were you then? You abandoned him. Some of you stabbed him in his leg, left him for dead, forced him into a position where he had to sign a treaty with the worst of people, Muawiyah. So he criticizes them for their abandonment before and says, now you have another chance. What are you going to do now? Muawiyah's grip is failing. I'm here. You recognize who I am. You know who I am. Will you support me tomorrow or not? And resoundingly they say yes. They pledge their support and say, we will be with you. When you make the call, we will be with you. On the day of Ashura, Imam Hussein makes a similar appeal to the Kufans, many of whom might have also been there in that crowd in Mina a year and 10 days, 2 years and 10 days before. Again, he comes out facing these 30,000 Kufans, and he reminds them and asks them, do you recognize who I am? Do you know that I'm Hussein ibn Ali? Do you know who my grandfather is? Do you know who my mother is, my father is, my brother is? Do you recognize, he even says that the turban I have on my head belonged to the Prophet? This is Sahab, the turban of the Prophet that I now wear on my head? They said, yes, we recognize that. Do you recognize the sword that I now wield in my scabbard, that this sword belonged to the Prophet? They said, yes, we recognize that. The abad, the rida that I'm wearing, it belonged to the Prophet? Yes, we recognize all of that. This time though, the response comes not as it had come in Mina, where people pledged their support, wagged their tongues and gave him support, lip service to support. Now the response comes from the Kufan army. We know all of that, we recognize all of that. But just as before you were too late, we'd already given our support to somebody else, now also you're too late. We've already given our support, we've already given our pledge to Ibn Ziyad. We've already given our pledge of allegiance to Yazid. If only you had come a few days earlier, things could have been different. Now, our duty is not to you, not to any of the pledges we've made to you in the past. Now our duty is to our commander. And they say that we will not rest until you die thirsty. We do not care if you die with no food, with no drink. Our duty is to abide by this pledge that we have made to Yazid and to Ibn Ziyad, and you will suffer. And you will not leave this place alive, and you will die hungry and thirsty. Allah la'natullahi ala al-qawmi al-zalimin. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdillah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifina'ik. Alayka minni salamullahi abadan ma baqit wa baqiya al-laylu wan-nahar. ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Allah, we ask you to shower your mercy and blessings on Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. Help us, Allah, during these days to commemorate Imam Hussein and his martyrdom in the best of ways. Help us to maintain our dignity in our commemoration and to raise the dignity and the honor of Islam. Forgive us for our sins through our commemorations. Help us to attach ourselves and align ourselves with Imam Hussein and with everything he stood for. Allow him to be our intercessor on the Day of Judgment. Let us live our lives in a way that Imam Hussein himself would be proud of us, where he would feel proud that we are his supporters and his followers. Allow us to be with our current Imam, with the 12th Imam, the descendant of Imam Hussein, when he rises up. Help us to be his supporters who never abandon him, who never turn their backs on him. Let our pledges of support for him be true from the bottom of our hearts, and let us not rest until he is happy with us and until he has attained victory over his enemies. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله.